All right, guys, so the next thing we're going to do is we're going to focus on stripping down the subframe and getting it painted, along with stripping down the rear end and getting it painted. I wanted to just show you guys kind of what we're dealing with here. I already replaced the metal around these areas here, so we're good to go here. I did this a while ago before I had the YouTube channel, so those are all good. So there shouldn't be any repairs that we have to make to the subframe, so it should be as simple as stripping it down and putting some paint on it. This car has a Ranchero kit on it. I'm not going to use any of the Ranchero stuff, except I probably will use this sway bar. I'm going to see if it'll work with the suspension that I'm using. We're going to just keep the suspension on a budget, so there won't be anything crazy. We're going to keep the control arms and stuff for now. That'll give me something to upgrade later. But for now, we're just going to do Detroit Speed coils and leaf springs, and then we'll use whatever shocks they recommend as well. So we're going to be restoring the control arms as well and sanding those down. We'll be replacing the bushings in the control arms and all that good stuff. So we got to get everything stripped off the subframe so that we can do that. So let's go ahead and start taking this motor out. All right, guys, so we got the headers out of the way. Let's go ahead and take the steering box off. Oh. All right, guys, so we got the bolts out of the steering box, and this was the one on the bottom here. A little harder to get out. It did come out. It's pretty rusty, so hopefully that doesn't mean that we have any kind of thin areas in the frame there. What happens a lot is the dirt and junk gets stuck in these low spots and it just sits there and then collects water. So you kind of see, yeah, so you can see the junk kind of sitting in there. So we'll have to get that out of there. And then what do we have over here? Luckily it doesn't look too bad. It's hard to tell because there's a plate here on this side that I'm assuming is to keep the subframe from squeezing in too tight if you over torque the bolts. So anyway, we'll get this taken apart, but first glance it looks pretty good in there. So we'll see once we get everything out of here. All right, guys, so now it's time to take the engine and trans out. So let's go ahead and get the lift on it and take it out. All right, guys, so we got the engine and transmission out of the subframe there. So one thing, it'll just help me kind of prepare for whenever we do the video on the LS1 here. This is a 98 LS1. I bought a computer for a 99 and up, so I'm going to switch that stuff over. But what else do I need to do with this engine before I put it back in the car? It came out of a junkyard. The car that it was in, I saw it wrecked. So the engine was running when it wrecked. This has about 100,000 miles on it, and it's the unfavored 98 LS1. So let me know what I need to swap to make it a little stronger. Let me know what I should refresh because it has 100,000 miles on it, and let me know what seals and everything I need to replace, or just send me a link or something down in the comments below. So anyway, let's get back to the subframe here. So we got the engine and transmission out, so let's go ahead and take that cross member out. All right, guys, I'm just going to go ahead and start taking all this stuff apart. I'll time lapse it and we'll go from there. One thing I'd say is just take note of your shims. You can see the difference here, and that's important for whenever you put this thing back together. It'll at least get you close, assuming your rod was aligned before you tore it apart. So you can see over here, same thing. We just got a couple up here, and then we got a pile of them up here. Let's go ahead and take care of all this stuff. Let's get it all off, bagged and tagged, and we'll be good to go. All right, guys, we got it torn down. Wasn't pretty, but we got it. It's been a long time since I've torn down a subframe, so it's good to do it again. So you probably saw over here whenever I was taking this apart, I used a chain, wrapped everything around it just in case, and I used a pig's foot to break it all apart. The safer way is probably to get a spring compressor, compress the spring, then lower it down, but you know, time is of the essence. So over here my battery died, so you didn't get to see the pig's foot go flying whenever I hit it, but just make sure if you do it the way I did it that you don't put your feet underneath of it or anything like that. Just put a chain around the spring and the control arms, and then when you knock it loose, it'll come down. So one issue I ran on this side is the shock had somebody put a bolt with a nut. I couldn't get it apart, so I thought it'd be easier once I took the control arm down, but it wasn't. It was actually harder. So I ended up just cutting the head of the bolt off and then pulling that shock out the bottom that way. So all good. Subframe looks pretty good. I don't see anything at first glance here that says there's any problems with it, any rust holes or anything like that. I'd be curious to see whenever I flip it over and clean up the other side, but everything's pretty good. It's just all greasy and dirty up here, so we're gonna pressure wash it and degrease it and all that before we do any sanding of it. These areas back here where you see the gray primer, that's whenever I replaced the holes for the body mounts, and I just ended up just sanding some of that and spraying it down with rattle can primer, so it's rusting through there, so I'll have to do it again. On the passenger side, this spring was in backwards, so you see how this coils up over here. There's a groove in the bottom control arm that this goes into, and then the top, it's flat. It's supposed to go up into the upper control arm there. So this one was in backwards and that one was in correctly. So I'm not sure why someone would flip them around unless they didn't realize there was a difference there. And then over here, I'm missing one bolt on this side. You can see these ones are pressed in, they don't move. And this one somebody replaced. It's got fine threads and everything, so I'll see what I can do with that. I'd like them to all be the same. All right, one final look at the aftermath here, all the parts and pieces. The only thing I'm really gonna use from any of this is gonna be the control arms. The ball joints look to be original. They got the factory rivets in them, unless you could buy them like that back in the day, but it's kind of crazy. I forget how many miles this car had on it. Looks like somebody put new brakes and rotors on it before I got it. These calipers look rather new, and the pads look very good. These were probably good at one point, but I'm not going to use them now because they've been sitting open for a long time. The rotors are nice and thick, and they're not all grooved up, but as cheap as they are, we'll just buy new ones. I got to replace all this stuff here too, because this is for the Camaro. I need the front end kit for a Firebird because I switched out my pitman arm so I could clear the alternator on the LS1. So that'll be going away. So I don't know if I can reuse this sway bar or not. I'm gonna definitely try. All the pieces are here. I don't know. Those are nice and tight still, so maybe I can use those, but I don't know where you'd get these pieces if you did need to replace them. All right, guys, so one last look at the parts here, the aftermath. I got a lot of stuff to clean up here. This will be going off to get pressure washed, and then eventually we'll be going for the rear end as well. So I'll probably just tear the rear end down a little bit so I can get them pressure washed together. But that's it for this video. If you like this type of stuff and you want to see this stuff all come together, get painted up, cleaned up real nice and put back onto the car, consider subscribing. And if you do subscribe, hit that notification bell so that you get alerts whenever we post new videos. We'll see you in the next one.